So the first thing we want to do is take our mold, and I am using a Polaroid mold from Cat's Perfect. She still has them on her site. I did a review for these. I will link both of them down below. So the first thing you're going to want to do is spray your mold with some sort of mold release conditioner. This isn't mandatory really, but it's very helpful. So I just use mine from Cast and Crafts. And it just basically makes it easier to pop your resin piece out of your mold once it has cured. So after we've done that, we'll set it aside, let it dry, and then we'll need some sort of container. Now I don't have a very big one because right now I'm just going to do the outside edges, and you're going to take any kind of container and you're going to want to have your resin. So I have the resin itself and then the hardener. Now this is separate and it does say caution, and some people might want to wear gloves if you are allergic to resin. I'm not, and I don't really worry about it too much, so I'm not wearing gloves, but it's safer if you wear gloves, especially if you're new to this. But basically the resin works as you take equal parts. So I'm going to pour a cap full of resin, which this is probably too much for what I'm going to need because I don't need a lot. So you're going to take that, and then you're going to take a cap full, or however much resin you want to use, just remember equal parts of your hardener. So we're just going to add that in. Depending on the kind of resin you get, there might be slightly different, but mostly you're just going to stir it slowly for about 5 minutes, and you want to do it slow because if you do it too quick you can create too many air bubbles, and we don't want that. So stirring it about as fast as I'm doing right now is pretty good. So when you're done mixing, your resin should look pretty clear and it should be this kind of consistency. And if you let it sit for a little bit, any bubbles that you did mix, a lot of them will pop on their own, but we do have ways to fix that in case they don't all pop. So because we are doing a Polaroid, I want the outside edges to be white, so I'm going to be using Cast and Crafts color pigment in white. And if you don't have any of this, you can use white paint, but you do want to just use a little bit because you do not want to change the consistency of your resin too much. So we're just going to add a couple of drops. It doesn't need a lot. And you can always add more if you're not happy with the color. But then we're just going to mix this in. So just with a few drops, we now have white resin. So now we're ready to add it into our mold. I'm going to use my tongue depressor to actually help me put it in because I only want it on the edges. So once we have our white resin poured in, we're going to wait at least 3 to 4 hours for this to start to dry. You can wait a full day for it to fully cure, but you definitely do want to let it dry some so that it's fairly solid when we add the next layer, so we don't have any of the resin pieces mixing together. So I will be back in a few hours to show you how to do the next part. So it's been a few hours since we poured our first layer of resin, and as we can see, it is fairly dry and ready for the next layer. So I've already mixed some new resin, and we're not going to add any colors, we're just going to use the clear resin. So while I was waiting for the resin to dry, I went on Google and I found a couple of pictures from Pokemon Snap to make our Pokemon Snap themed magnets. And what I did is I printed these on photo paper because it'll make them more resilient, because we are actually sticking these down into the resin. So I would recommend using photo paper or taking regular paper and putting tape or laminate around it just to protect it. So we're going to take one of these pictures and we're going to place it face down. And it's okay if it's a little bit bigger because the white is going to block it out. So it's going to look like something like this. And then we're going to add our resin just right on top. So we're going to go slowly. So once we have our first layer in here, we're going to check for any bubbles. But if you did have bubbles, you could take a needle or a paper clip and poke them, or you could take a straw and you can blow lightly and it will pop the bubbles themselves. Now we are going to want to check on this a couple of times because sometimes your picture or your sticker, whatever you set in it, can shift while the resin is drying. So we're just going to want to make sure that it stays in position, and we can just take whatever our mixing tool was and just go right in and press it down. So we'll want to go back and check. But pretty much after that, we are going to let this completely dry for 24 hours before we try to pop this out. So I will be back in that time to show you what it looks like and the last step for adding the magnet. So now that it's been over 24 hours, we are going to take our resin and we're going to pop it out of our mold by slightly pushing on the sides and the bottom until it pops out. So this is what our resin piece looks like. So the last step is to add the magnet. And there's a couple ways you can do this. You can simply take some glue and stick it on. Or what we're going to do is we're going to actually dome the back because it is a little bit dipped through here. So the back isn't perfectly flat. So to do that, we're going to take some resin, which again I've already mixed up. And we're just going to take a little bit and put it on the back. So once we have a layer of resin on the back, we are just going to simply stick in our magnet. And we're going to let that sit for another 24 hours, and then your magnet will be finished. And after about another day, our Pokemon Snap magnet is all ready to go. So go ahead and stick them on your fridge or any other magnetic surface. We're done.